The arrival of help. The colonists of New Haven watched with desperate hope as the massive humanitarian vessel descended through their purple-tinged atmosphere. The ship's hull gleamed with the pristine white of Earth's relief corps, its markings, promising salvation to the struggling xenoform colony. After 3 cycles of failing crops and dwindling supplies, help had finally arrived. Colony Administrator Zextal, his crystalline skin dulled from stress and malnutrition, stood at the head of the welcoming committee. His people, the Arxians, had established New Haven as their first extrasolar colony, but their pride had given way to desperation months ago when the native bacteria began destroying their food supplies. The ship's landing ramp extended with a soft hiss, and out walked their saviors. Captain Marcus Winter led the human delegation, his uniform crisp and his smile warm. Behind him came his crew: Chief Medical Officer Diane Porter, Resource Manager James Crawford, and a dozen other personnel in pristine humanitarian corps uniforms. Administrator Zextal, Winter's voice carried across the landing pad. The Earth. Relief Corps received your distress call. We're here to help. Zextal's secondary hearts fluttered with relief. Captain Winter, your arrival brings hope to our people. We have nearly 10,000 colonists in desperate need of assistance, and help them we shall, Winter replied, his smile never wavering. We've brought food supplies, medical equipment, and agricultural specialists. We'll have your colony back on its feet in no time. The first few days seemed like a miracle. The humans worked tirelessly, distributing food, treating the sick, and analyzing the crop failure. They even helped repair the colony's failing power grid, winning the trust and gratitude of the colonists. But Vexra, the administrator's daughter, and the colony's chief botanist, noticed something odd about their saviors. Small things at first. Questions about mineral deposits that seemed irrelevant to their mission, unusual interest in the colony's defense systems, communications that didn't quite match official Relief Corps protocols. There's something wrong, she told her father one evening, her crystalline form catching the light of their binary stars. I've been checking their credentials against the Earth database. Some of them don't match. Zextal dismissed her concerns initially. After all, the humans were helping, weren't they? The food they brought was real enough. The medical supplies saved lives. But then came the subtle changes. The human security teams began supplementing the colony's own security forces. Supply distributions became more controlled, with the humans insisting on managing all resources directly. Captain Winter's warm smile remained, but it no longer reached his eyes. One night, Vexra was working late in the botanical labs when she overheard a conversation she wasn't meant to hear. Winter's voice drifted through the ventilation system, speaking to someone over a private channel. Phase 1 is complete. The colony's dependent on our supplies now. Begin moving in the mining equipment under cover of the agricultural machinery. These idiots are sitting on one of the largest deposits of quantum crystals in the sector, and they don't even know it. Vexra's crystalline form vibrated with shock. The humans weren't saviors. They were predators, using the colony's desperation as a way to infiltrate and take control. But by the time she reached her father's office with the recording, it was already too late. The Relief Corps ship had been joined by 3 others, all bearing the same pristine white markings. But these weren't the markings of real humanitarian vessels. They were perfect forgeries, hiding the true nature of these helpers who were human, yes, but not the kind anyone would want to meet. As Vexra looked out over her colony, now effectively under the control of these wolves in shepherd's clothing, she realized that their real struggle was just beginning. The question wasn't whether they would survive anymore. It was whether they could free themselves from their saviors before there was nothing left to save. Winter's voice came over the colony's announcement system, still maintaining that benevolent facade. Attention, colonists. For your own safety, we're implementing new security protocols. Please remain calm and cooperative. We're here to help. Never had 4 simple words, "We're here to help," sounded more threatening. Beneath the surface, the changes came gradually, like poison seeping into the colony's bloodstream. 2 weeks after Winter's security protocols were implemented, New Haven had transformed from a struggling but free colony into what felt increasingly like a prison camp. Vexra watched from her lab as another convoy of agricultural equipment rolled through the streets. The massive vehicles bore the Relief Corps emblem, but their reinforced hulls and sealed compartments spoke of something far less benevolent. She'd managed to scan one secretly. It contained mining equipment designed for deep crystal extraction. "Your daily resource report, Miss Vexra." Resource Manager Crawford appeared at her door, his clipboard held like a shield. His pleasant smile didn't match the coldness in his eyes. "We'll need an inventory of all your remaining seed stocks." "Of course." Vexra kept her voice steady, her crystalline form deliberately dulled to hide her emotions. "Though I'm curious, why we need so many reports when your ships brought enough supplies to feed the colony for months." Crawford's smile tightened. "Standard procedure. Captain Winter insists on thorough documentation. For your benefit, of course." After he left, Vexra activated her secure terminal, adding another entry to her growing list of inconsistencies. The humans had indeed brought food, but they were controlling its distribution with an iron grip, making the colony increasingly dependent on their generosity. A soft chime indicated an incoming message from Kraltex, her childhood friend, who worked in communications. The message was encoded in ancient Arxian musical patterns, something the humans wouldn't think to monitor. "Storage Bay 7 midnight. Bring proof." That night, Vexra slipped through the shadows of her once familiar colony. New security cameras tracked movement everywhere, and human guards patrolled in pairs. They carried weapons that didn't look like standard humanitarian issue. Kraltex was waiting inside an old maintenance tunnel, his crystalline form dimmed to near invisibility. "Look at this," he whispered, projecting a hologram from his data crystal. "I've been monitoring their communications. They're not sending reports to Earth Relief Corps headquarters. Their transmissions are going to something called Phoenix Operations." Vexra shared her own findings: the mining equipment, the resource hoarding, the systematic way the humans were taking control of critical infrastructure. "They're not here to save us," she concluded. "They're here to strip our world." "It's worse," Kraltex's voice cracked. "I found references to other colonies, Starfall Basin, New Arcturus, Havens Point. All received humanitarian aid from similar ships. All went dark within months." A noise outside made them freeze. Heavy boots on metal grating getting closer. They pressed themselves against the tunnel walls, their crystalline bodies refracting the dim light. "Search every level." Winter's voice echoed through the corridor. "Someone accessed restricted communications channels. Find them." For 3 agonizing minutes, they remained motionless as guards swept past their hiding spot. When the sound of boots finally faded, Vexra let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "We need to warn the other colonies," she whispered. "And we need to find a way to contact the real Earth authorities." "How?" "They control all long-range communications." "Not all of them." Vexra's inner light pulsed with determination. "Remember the old emergency beacon in the southern mountains, from before we established the main colony? It's powered by crystal energy, our energy. They might not even know it exists." A plan began to form. The beacon was 3 days' journey through harsh terrain, but if they could activate it, its signal would reach Earth directly, bypassing the humans' controlled channels. But as they plotted, they didn't notice the small drone hovering silently in the tunnel's shadows, its camera focused on their meeting. In his command center, Captain Winter watched the feed with growing anger. "It seems some of our grateful recipients need a lesson in appreciation," he told his officers. "Prepare for Phase 3. If these aliens want to see what we're really capable of, I'm happy to oblige." He turned to a large display showing a map of the quantum crystal deposits beneath the colony. The largest concentration lay directly under the main residential sector. "Begin the evacuation protocol. Tell them we've detected dangerous bacterial growth in their living quarters. Move them to the safety of the containment facilities." "Sir," Crawford interjected, "some of them might resist." Winter's smile was colder than space itself. "Then we'll show them what happens when they refuse our help." In her hidden tunnel, Unaware of the storm about to break, Vexra made plans to reach the emergency beacon. But time was running out. The helpers were showing their true faces, and they wore expressions of calculated cruelty masked by false concern. The next day would prove that when humans like these offered help, survival meant learning to help yourself. The Web Titan's dawn broke over New Haven with the sound of sirens. The human security forces moved through the residential sectors with practiced efficiency, their white uniforms now supplemented with combat gear. Over the colony's communication system, Winter's voice maintained its facade of concern. This is a mandatory evacuation order. Dangerous bacterial concentrations have been detected in residential zones A through F. For your safety, please proceed to the designated containment facilities. This is not optional. From her hiding place in the maintenance tunnels, Vexra watched through a monitoring crystal as her people were herded like livestock. The Arxians' crystalline forms dulled with fear as they were separated into groups, families torn apart under the pretext of quarantine procedures. They're starting with the outer rings, Kraltex whispered, his own form barely visible in the dim light. Moving inward, sector by sector. How many have joined the resistance? Vexra asked. 300, maybe 4. Most are former security, officers, scientists, maintenance workers, people who saw through the deception early. A quiet beep from Kraltex's communicator interrupted them. The message was brief but devastating. Their father, Administrator Zextal, had been arrested for interfering with humanitarian operations. Vexra's crystalline surface crackled with suppressed rage. They'll use him to control the council. There's more. Kraltex's voice dropped lower. I managed to decrypt more of their communications. These containment facilities, they're not temporary. They're processing centers. Once they have our people contained, they'll begin strip mining the crystal deposits. The radiation from their mining equipment, he didn't need to finish. They both knew what prolonged exposure to quantum mining radiation would do to their crystalline biology. The humans weren't just planning to steal their resources, they were orchestrating a slow genocide. Above them, Winter's voice continued its soothing lies. Remember, we're here to help. Cooperation ensures your safety. But help had become a weapon, wielded with surgical precision. The humans had studied their victims well. They knew the Arxians' diplomatic nature, their tendency to seek peaceful solutions. They had counted on it, used it against them. The beacon is our only hope, Vexra said, pulling up a holographic map of the mountain routes. But we'll need a distraction, something big enough to draw their attention away from the southern perimeter. A new voice spoke from the shadows. Perhaps we can help with that. Out stepped Jordan, the colony's chief engineer, followed by a dozen other resistance members. Their crystalline forms showed signs of battle, dulled patches, microfractures from close calls with human weapons. We've been mapping their patrol patterns, Jordan continued, and we found something interesting. Their ships? They're powered by our quantum crystals. That's why they need so many guards around their landing pads. Without a constant supply, their vessels are grounded. For the first time in weeks, Vexra felt a spark of real hope. If we could disrupt their crystal supply, we can do more than disrupt it. Jordan's form brightened with fierce determination. We can detonate it. A properly triggered quantum crystal explosion would knock out their power grid, disable their communications, ground their ships, create enough chaos for a small team to reach the beacon. The plan took shape quickly. The resistance had people in key positions, maintenance workers, power plant operators, even a few who had gained the humans' trust by appearing especially cooperative. They would strike at multiple points simultaneously, overwhelming the humans' ability to respond. But as they finalized their preparations, Winter was making plans of his own. In his command center, he reviewed the latest security footage, his expression thoughtful. They're plotting something, he told his officers. These creatures aren't as docile as our intelligence suggested. He pulled up a display showing the colony's power grid. Double the guards on all critical infrastructure, and accelerate the processing schedule. I want the first mining operations to begin within 48 hours. He paused, studying a map of the surrounding mountains. And send drones to scan the perimeter. If they're planning to call for help, they'll need a long-range transmitter. Find it. In the tunnels, Vexra checked her equipment one final time. The resistance would strike at dawn, when the binary star's radiation would interfere with human sensors. Success meant salvation. Failure meant extinction. Remember, she told her fellow rebels, these humans came as helpers, but they're predators wearing saviors' clothes. Tomorrow, we show them that not all prey is helpless. As the colony's artificial night cycle began, both sides prepared for battle. The humans readied their weapons and mining equipment, confident in their superior technology and military training. The Arxians gathered their courage and knowledge of their own world, preparing to fight for their very existence. Dawn would reveal which side had underestimated the other. Fighting back. The binary stars of New Haven painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold as Vexra positioned herself near the colony's main power distribution hub. Around her, other resistance members waited in shadow, their crystalline forms deliberately dulled to near invisibility. The morning radiation storm would begin in exactly 7 minutes. Through her secure communicator, she heard Jordan's whispered countdown. In the power plant, he and his team had spent weeks appearing to cooperate with their human helpers, while secretly preparing for this moment. They had one chance to get this right. Captain Winter stood in his command center reviewing the night's security reports. Something felt off, but he couldn't quite place it. The aliens had been almost too compliant lately, too accepting of their new restrictions. His years of experience running these humanitarian operations had taught him that such compliance usually preceded. The first explosion rocked the colony like a thunderclap. Quantum crystal energy surged through the power grid in a carefully orchestrated overload. Lights flickered and died across the settlement as secondary explosions chained through the backup systems. In the sudden darkness, Winter's voice crackled. Over emergency channels. All units full alert, this is not a drill. But the resistance had only begun. As human security forces rushed to contain the power plant situation, Kraltex and his team struck the communication array. They didn't destroy it. They did something far worse. Using codes gathered over weeks of careful observation, they initiated a complete system reset, flooding all channels with conflicting emergency protocols. "Sir!" Crawford burst into Winter's command center. "We're losing control of the containment facilities. The security doors are cycling randomly." Winter's face contorted with rage. "How? These primitives shouldn't be capable of—" Another explosion cut him off, this one from the direction of the landing pads. Through the observation windows, he watched in disbelief as quantum crystal detonations disabled 2 of his ships. But Winter hadn't survived this long by being unprepared. "Initiate Protocol Omega," he ordered. "If these creatures want to resist our help, we'll show them the cost of ingratitude." Deep in the colony's infrastructure, massive mining machines rumbled to life. They had been disguised as construction equipment, smuggled in piece by piece, under the guise of infrastructure support. Now their true purpose was revealed, not to mine carefully around the residential areas, but to tear through them without regard for who or what stood in their way. "They're starting the mining operation," Jordan's voice crackled through Vexra's communicator. "We can't hold the power plant much longer." Vexra knew this would happen. The humans were being forced to accelerate their plans, to show their true faces. Now came the most crucial part of the Resistance's strategy. As the mining machines began their destructive advance, the residential sectors erupted in coordinated chaos. But it wasn't panic. It was precision. Hundreds of Arxians, their bodies glowing with deliberately amplified crystal energy, emerged from hiding places throughout the colony. The radiation from their combined forms played havoc with human scanning equipment, creating a web of false readings that made it impossible to track individual movements. "Status on the southern perimeter?" Vexra demanded. "Human forces are scattered just as we planned," came the response. "The path to the beacon is clear." Vexra gave the signal. While the humans struggled to contain what they thought was a full-scale uprising, a small team led by Kraltex slipped away toward the mountains. They carried with them a data crystal containing evidence of everything the humanitarian mission had really been doing, not just on New Haven but on other colonies as well. Winter, watching his carefully constructed operation descend into chaos, made his final mistake. "Deploy the sonic disruptors," he ordered. "Full spectrum. Let's see how these crystals handle that." But the Arxians had anticipated this too. As the sonic weapons powered up, hundreds of crystalline bodies began resonating at precisely calculated frequencies. The resulting harmonic cascade didn't just neutralize the weapons. It turned them into feedback loops that overwhelmed their operators' protective gear. In the command center, Winter watched in disbelief as his forces were systematically outmaneuvered by the very primitives he had dismissed. These weren't the actions of a simple colony. This was the carefully orchestrated response of a people who had been planning their resistance from the very first day the helpers had arrived. "Sir?" Crawford's voice shook as he delivered the final blow to their operation. "We're picking up a transmission from the southern mountains. It's broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. Earth Defense Force frequencies." Winter's face went pale. Not the false frequencies they used for their operations, but the real ones. The ones that would bring the full attention of Earth's actual authorities down on their operation. Through the chaos of battle, Vexra allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The humans had come offering help, thinking they had found another easy target. Instead, they had discovered that some forms of help deserved to be rejected, violently if necessary. As real Earth Defense Force ships began appearing on long-range scanners responding to the beacon's call, Winter faced the realization that he and his crew would soon experience what it felt like to be on the receiving end of unwanted help. The night sky above New Haven lit up with the arrival of actual Earth military vessels, their weapons trained on Winter's grounded ships. The false helpers were about to learn a harsh lesson. Sometimes those who come to exploit the vulnerable find themselves facing unexpected resistance and genuine justice. True help arrives. The detention cell aboard the Earth Defense Force. Flagship Justice was a far cry from the luxurious quarters Captain Winter had enjoyed during his reign of terror. Through the energy barrier, he watched as real humanitarian workers moved through the colony below. Their authentic credentials verified by multiple sources, their actions monitored by both Earth and Arxian observers. Commander Olivia Hayes of the Earth Defense Force stood in the colony's central plaza, her weathered face grave as she reviewed the evidence compiled by Vexra and the Resistance. Behind her, teams of investigators documented the false helpers' crimes, uncovering a network of exploitation that spanned multiple sectors. 6 colonies, Hayes announced to the gathered council of Arxian leaders. "Your transmission exposed operations at 6 different colonies. We've already dispatched ships to each location." She turned to Vexra, who stood with her father, recently freed from the containment facility. "Your people's resistance didn't just save New Haven. You've helped us uncover one of the largest criminal operations in Earth's colonial territories." Administrator Zextal, his crystalline form still showing signs of his imprisonment, addressed the assembly. "We were desperate, and they knew it. They studied our weaknesses, our traditions, our tendency to trust. They weaponized our own diplomatic nature against us. But they made one crucial mistake," Vexra added, her form glowing with quiet strength. "They assumed that trust meant weakness. They never considered that a civilization capable of interstellar travel might also be capable of seeing through their deception." In his cell, Winter seethed as he watched his carefully constructed operation crumble. His crew was being rounded up across 3 sectors, their network of false humanitarian ships impounded, their stolen resources catalogued as evidence. Decades of profitable assistance missions, ended by the very primitives they had intended to exploit. On the colony's surface, real reconstruction had begun. Genuine Earth medical teams worked alongside Arxian healers, treating those who had suffered under the false helpers regime. Engineers from both species collaborated to repair the damage done by the mining equipment, their efforts observed by transparency committees established to prevent any future deceptions. "We found something interesting in Winter's files," Commander Hayes told Vexra as they walked through the recovering colony. "Do you know why they chose your people as targets?" Vexra's crystalline surface rippled with curiosity. "It wasn't just your resources," Hayes continued. "It was your reputation for being peaceful, diplomatic. They thought this made you perfect victims. Instead, it made you perfect strategists. While they were watching for weapons, you were building a resistance based on intelligence and coordination." In the mountains where the emergency beacon had turned the tide, Kraltex and a team of Earth communication specialists were establishing a new early warning system. Never again would false helpers be able to isolate a colony from real assistance. During the evening ceremony of remembrance, Administrator Zextal addressed both his people and the Earth Defense Force representatives. "We have learned harsh lessons about trust," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "But we have also learned the difference between true assistance and exploitation disguised as help. Real helpers do not demand control. They do not isolate those they claim to aid. They work alongside us, respecting our autonomy and dignity." Commander Hayes stepped forward, presenting a formal document. "Earth wishes to establish a permanent diplomatic mission here," she announced. "Not to control or to help, but to collaborate. Any assistance will be at your request, with full transparency and oversight from both our peoples." As the binary stars set on New Haven, casting their mixed light across the colony, Vexra stood with her father and Kraltex, watching Earth and Arxian medical teams working together to treat the last of the injured colonists. "They came offering help we desperately needed," Vexra reflected, "counting on that desperation to blind us. But they forgot something fundamental about help." She turned to watch as Winter and his crew were transported to Earth vessels for trial. "Real help empowers. It doesn't imprison." In the following months, New Haven became a symbol of resistance and recovery. The story of how a peaceful colony had outsmarted their would-be exploiters spread through the galaxy, serving as both a warning to other predatory helpers and an inspiration to vulnerable settlements. The quantum crystal mines, now properly developed through genuine cooperation between Earth and Arxian engineers, provided resources that benefited both species. But more valuable than the crystals was the lesson learned, that true help could be distinguished from false by one simple measure, whether it left those receiving it stronger and more independent, or weaker and more controlled. As New Haven flourished under genuine cooperation, its story became a cautionary tale throughout human space. Beware of helpers who arrive uninvited, bearing gifts that become chains. For while they might be human, they were not the kind of humans anyone would want to meet. The final entry in Winter's case file summed it up perfectly. The greatest threat to vulnerable colonies isn't open hostility, it's predatory assistance. But as New Haven proved, even the most carefully crafted deception cannot withstand the power of a united resistance that refuses to be victims.